All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the architectural blueprint, the state of Eureka, present and future. My name is Craig McNally. I'm here with my collaborators, Todd Olson, Vince Barreau, and Alexei Kuzmanov. All right, so the agenda today, we'll start off with a brief introduction, level set everyone on what this session is and is not. We'll cover the current state of Eureka. We'll take a look at what's coming and sort of the future looking ahead. And then we'll cover some additional information and wrap up with some questions at the end. So what to expect from this session? This is not a Eureka overview. I think if you're involved in the Folio community, you probably have heard of Eureka at the very least, and you may even have some experience working with it. So we've done those presentations before. If you are new to Eureka, you've never heard of it or don't know what it is, feel free to stick around. You may still get a lot of value out of this session. And there's links at the end of the presentation to additional information. The way that we structured this session is we'll introduce sort of a theme that covers a bunch of different topics, and then pause and sort of have a discussion with the audience here, and let the audience sort of choose your own path. What is it that's most interesting to you? Because there's so much content that we just can't get to all of it. And then we'll introduce the next topic and so forth. So let's get into it. We're starting with the current state. Yes, it's a bad joke. All right, role-based access controls, one of probably the most common questions that we get about Eureka is, what is this stuff about roles? It's one of the more user-facing aspects of Eureka. And so some of the improvements that we've made as we've gotten some feedback include, adding a fully functional search and filter for when you're selecting applications. So there's that modal you can see in the top right corner there, and you can search. There's a search box, there's some filters there, and I think that's going to be more and more important as the number of applications grows. What else have we done? We've added some sort of quality of life improvements like these check boxes you can see in the bottom right-hand corner here at the top of the columns when you're managing roles, allowing you to select all the capabilities within that within that column. So instead of selecting maybe 600 or 60 boxes, you can accomplish that with selecting just a few. There are some other features. I won't go through all of that stuff here. Migration improvements is another area where we've made great strides. Some of the feedback we got initially was, what is it? We're migrating from Okapi to Eureka. What are these roles that get created? It doesn't even make any sense to us. So we've improved that. We've introduced this Folio user permissions mapper. It's a command line interface tool that provides some analysis of your current user-defined permission set structure and what that might look like once it's mapped to roles. It gives you an opportunity to maybe I want to make some adjustments to my permission sets, but before I run this tool again, and you can run it, see the analysis, and say, yep, all right, let's pull the trigger, let's do this. And that maintains, it does the flattening of, hierarchical permission sets into roles while maintaining a lot of the same structure that you had before. The permission set names will be carried forward and so forth. So there will still be some cleanup required, but it's going to be a lot closer to, what you would expect to see, I think. And I won't dwell on this too much more because we do have another session coming up later this week, roles management with Eureka, and we'll cover not just this, but various other aspects of roles management. It's sort of like a tutorial plus a presentation. So we'll be walking through how to create a role and edit a role and so forth. Application composition is another important area of Eureka, and this is sort of the update that we have so far. There's an ongoing initiative with several folks in the community to continue to refine the applications that we have today. So when we first introduced Eureka, we had like maybe 3 or 4 applications. They were absolutely massive. They had a lot of modules in there. We even referred to them as mega applications. And so as you can see in the bottom left, this effort to sort of refine that break down those mega applications into smaller, more logical pieces, is trending in the right direction. With Ramson's, we had something like 12 applications. With Sunflower, it's somewhere around 16. And then presently where we are with Trillium, it's around 29 or 30. And that's not just splitting up the mega applications. That's also, as new functionality is introduced to Folio, we're encouraging teams to create their own applications for that functionality as opposed to, jamming it into these mega applications, making the problem worse. So on the right-hand side, we have this somewhat complex diagram. I won't cover it in a lot of detail. It's generated by this tool. You can see the link in the bottom right here. And so it's a dynamically generated thing based on some JSON in GitHub. And it shows all the applications and their sort of dependencies between them. Dotted lines mean optional dependencies, and red lines indicate that maybe there's some suboptimal things about these dependencies. So it's interesting to check in on this every now and then to see how that refinement process is going. And the last thing that we'll cover for the current state is adoption. So there are a couple different sort of angles to this. On the SysOps side, we have KitFox is now running snapshot environments, sprint environments, dev environments in Rancher that are all Eureka based. Those get generated on a regular basis. We also have an early adopter program, which includes different organizations, Texas A&M, GBV, Index Data, Stanford, and HPZ. They've made great progress in standing up Eureka, collaborating with one another, sharing information, and so forth. On the testing side, karate tests. There was a team that was around temporarily called the Dojo team. Their mission was to take the karate tests and adapt them to be usable with Eureka. So that's done. We also have Eureka-based bug fests. Going back to Ramson's, we had both Eureka and Okapi-based bug fests. And then with Sunflower and going forward, bug fests will be based off Eureka. In the PTF, the performance task force there's an ongoing evaluation of Eureka's performance, and it's looking good. On the developer side, we've pulled together a developer guide. We didn't take all the documents and put them in a single location, but we did pull together sort of an outline where you can go to help you find the necessary resources. And we've also introduced a Eureka CLI for helping run Eureka locally on your development machine. And that's thanks to Boberbeck and the ThunderJet team. They took the initiative to do this on their own, so really greatly appreciated. On the community side, we have the Tech Council. I can't speak for the other councils, but I know that the TC has been incorporating Eureka into their processes, into their officially supported technology list, into their module evaluation criteria, and so forth. And not mentioned on this slide, but Eureka is actually out there. It's running in at least one major customer of ours. And very soon, once Sunflower CSP1 is out, EBSCO and the FSC team plan to start rolling it out to all of our customers. So that's sort of the current state of things. Before we go on, any questions so far? And we will be time boxing each of these sections so we can get to everything. Wayne? Hold on one sec. Let's do the microphone.
Thanks, Craig. I just you may have missed an opportunity. One of the things in the SysOp category there that you guys have also done is put together an operations guide, or the beginnings at least of an operations guide, and thank you for that. So the question I had was, you were talking about application composition as a community effort, and I was wondering how people can be involved in that.
Sure. I think Alexei Petrenko is sort of organizing and driving that along with Nikita, the Scrum Master from ThunderJet. So I would All right, let's keep going because there's a lot of content here, and the more we can get to, the better, I think. Uh-oh, the internet connection is unstable. All right, well, let's keep going. So the first theme I'd like to introduce is sort of quality of life, management, support. The question is, how do we make Eureka easier to use, maintain, et cetera? And so on the manager service and system operations side, there's a couple things that we are coming down the pike here. One being desired state entitlements, where instead of saying, I want to explicitly upgrade this thing or entitle this thing or revoke this application for this tenant, you basically specify, here's the end state that I want to be at, and let the system determine, okay, yeah, I already know about this thing. This other thing needs to be upgraded. This one isn't in the list anymore. I need to take that away, and so forth. So that should be a big help for system administrators. The Folio Application Registry, or FAR, is a concept that we introduced a couple of years ago now. It's been available from a tech with the application manager. However, there have been some, as KitFox has started to play around with this and try to get one up and running, there were a couple bumps in the road. So we've actually addressed a lot of those issues, and now I think KitFox is now unblocked. So hence the coming soon. I think that could be very soon, within days or weeks. Kong open source. So yeah, the situation with Kong open source, Kong is the API gateway that Eureka is using. In the open source situation has sort of changed. And so we're doing what we can to explore all of our options before making a decision as to, what are the next steps here. And declarative capabilities. So presently, the way that Eureka works is it takes information from the module descriptors about permissions and then derives information from that to create capabilities. And what we found is that there are a lot of edge cases. There's a lot of inconsistency within Folio of how permissions are defined, used, and named. And that makes things a little bit more complex than maybe we anticipated. So there are some opportunities as we transition or move more in on Eureka and less on Okapi to transition to declarative capabilities, declaring them, making them sort of first-class objects as opposed to something that's derived. And I think that would greatly simplify the code and sort of provide additional visibility for people that are creating roles. So I'll stop here, and we'll see, is there any areas here that folks would like to drill into a little bit deeper? Yeah, which one would you guys like to focus on? Anyone in chat chiming in?
Nothing in chat.
Okay, I mean, oh, go ahead, Stephen.
I'll say it, Mike. So how about we talk about the Kong situation a little bit, because that one has some other implications.
Sure, and the link is not working for some reason, so I'm gonna have to scroll through here just a second. Too far. Here we go. All right, so the situation with Kong. Yeah, people heard about this, and is it time to panic? No, I don't think so. So the situation is that Kong Incorporated, the organization, the company that was sort of the main contributor to the open source Kong project, has changed its stance on how it's going to support open source Kong. And so the code is still there. It's still open source. They've effectively forked it on their own. Their enterprise edition is continuing to receive features and bug fixes and so forth with really tight SLAs. And the open source version is not receiving any new features from Kong Incorporated. It is getting bug fixes and security vulnerability fixes, but on a much looser SLA. So less guarantees on the timing of that stuff. And so what's unclear is whether or not the broader open source community is going to step up to maintain this stuff and help patch bugs and do like binary distributions and so forth. So I think the silver lining here is that with Eureka, we focus on having single purpose components. And that's gives us gives us more options essentially, right? Because we're not doing anything that's super esoteric here, where it's like an API gateway plus, tenant management or anything like that. So an API gateway is a pretty common thing, and we have several options there. Folio modules are also isolated from the particularities of the API gateway. What I mean by that is the modules don't know anything about Kong. Most of the components in Folio don't know anything about Kong. It's really just a couple manager services that would need to be adjusted if we were to replace Kong with something else. So what is the plan? We're sort of taking a two-pronged approach to this. We wanted to investigate how to build Kong from source and create our own binary distributions. And so that proof of concept or that investigation has already been done. There's some documentation on the wiki. I probably should have linked it here, but I didn't think about that. And it's certainly doable. And the other prong is evaluate alternatives. So doing sort of a breadth first search of the landscape of the API gateway, marketplace, so to speak, for open source alternatives, and then drilling into individual ones that we think are most promising. So we did sort of the overview research, and then we started to look into Apache API 6. That sort of deep dive investigation is just wrapping up now. There are one or two others that we may also choose to investigate deeper. And some of the key considerations, right? Because it's not just single faceted here. What is the fit? Does it have all the functionality that we need? Does it scale well? What about performance? Is there a graphical management user interface? Those are important things. Kong has all of those things. It checks all the boxes. That's why we selected it initially. But also, let's not repeat our mistakes. What is the sort of health and size of the community behind the gateway itself? Is most of the contributions coming from some corporation that might change their minds just like Kong Incorporated did? Or is it more grassroots where it's a vibrant open source community where contributions are coming from all over the place? And then finally, sysops impact. Does hosting this new gateway, require sysops to jump through hoops and learn a lot of new technologies? Or is it a simple, it's just a different Docker image that I need to run? So, and I put abstraction layer here. It's a concept that we've talked about. Maybe it'd be nice if we had an abstraction layer that allowed you to pretty much bring your own gateway sort of situation. If you want to stick with Kong, you can do that. If you want to use API 6, you can do that. I think that it sounds good on paper, but it doesn't really, given the points that I made earlier about there aren't many modules, there aren't many components within Folio that are even aware of the gateway. I think that's where you would get the most benefit from an abstraction layer, is if there was, a lot of different components that need to interact with Kong, or the gateway, I should say. But here, it's mostly a sysops-facing thing. And there's only a couple places where you would need to change code to incorporate a new gateway.
My question.
So we have a question online from Shelley asking, given the inspirational talk from Rosalind this morning and that we are in a situation with regards to Kong, are there any similar discussions happening with regards to the Spring framework being a VMware product? Jason Root answered that he's not aware of any. I'm not aware that we have any similar conversations going on either, but it's something to note. We should probably look at that and see what the changes are. I'm not personally familiar with what changes may be occurring in the Spring framework. I don't know. Alexi, do you know? Greg?
No, I'm not aware of anything either. I will note that this isn't a novel problem. I mean, Folio project has run into similar situations in the past rather, with if you remember the Elasticsearch OpenSearch thing, and slightly different, but sort of tangentially related problems with, like, is it S3 or MinIO, and things like that. So as an open source project, we're using a lot of open source projects, right? And you never know, it's always evolving, things are changing, and we just need to be, nimble. Right. Any other questions on Kong? What are we doing on time?
Do you have a specific time frame in mind for when, this will be resolved as far as like which direction we end up going with Kong?
I don't have any specific dates in mind. I will say that, like I said, the investigation into API 6 is wrapping up. And then assuming that we want to look at, one or two other gateways, I would assume that's a couple weeks out for that. If not, 3 or 4 weeks maybe. And then some discussion and a lot of debating and figure out where to go from there. And all the while, we're waiting to see if anyone in the Kong community is going to step up as well, right? That could be a real game changer if someone does. The question was, are we doing a proof of concept for API 6? Yeah, it does. The investigation, the deep dive does include a small proof of concept component to it as well. Our solution architect, Victor Gemma, is, standing up Kong and evaluating some of the things that we saw in the sort of the initial research as potentially problematic or potentially interesting and so forth. So, yeah, I can't really speak to the results yet. I'm not even sure if they've been published yet, but it's work in progress. Okay, so if I go back to that theme, anything else here? I think we probably have like 5 more minutes in this section if we want to drill into any of these other topics. All right, well, let's keep going. The next theme is independent application releases and sort of what are the required features or functionalities that we need to get there. What do I mean by independent application releases? It's really about today we have these monolithic flaw releases where all the stars need to align. Everything needs to be released and coordinated and so forth. And it's so heavyweight that we can realistically only do it 2, maybe 3 times a year. And so where we'd like to head is now that we have applications, move to an independent release cycle for each of those applications. So if there's an application or a functional area that has a lot of movement, there's a lot of new features coming for it, maybe that gets released more frequently than some applications that are sort of in maintenance mode. And so there are a couple enablers that we need to get there. The first being application-specific UI bundles. So right now, Stripes doesn't know anything about applications, and there's sort of this gap. When you build the UI for Folio, it's, you feed it in some files, package JSON, Stripes config.js, and so forth, and those are completely separate from that tenant's entitlements. So you could generate a UI bundle that has, these certain versions of UI modules, but your entitlements say something completely different, and this sort of mismatch is problematic. So there is work in progress. The Stripes Force team is, this is a link here to Stripes 983. That's an umbrella task that has a bunch of work underneath it and has some, in-depth diagrams and stuff as well. Feel free to check that out if you're interested in the details. The plan is to leverage something called Module Federation, which is a Webpack technology, to dynamically load shared application bundles at runtime. So instead of creating one bundle for every tenant, you would create a bundle that has just the tenant branding. It's a really thin layer, right? And then after that, you would create a bundle for each application, and those bundles are shared. And so at runtime, when you log in, Stripes would pull in and dynamically load the bundles based on your entitlements. Next up, module boundaries and dependencies. In order to continue to further refine that application composition I was showing earlier, we're starting to reach that point where, yeah, there are some technical barriers here now. And a lot of that has to do with module boundaries and sort of the interconnectivity of the tight coupling between modules. We have modules that are doing too many different things. We have situations that lead to sort of circular dependencies and so forth. So there are some techniques that we could use to help improve that. And it could be anything from refactoring code to using optional dependencies or leveraging messaging and eventing a little bit more. Formalizing Kafka interactions. This is an old one. This one goes back a long time. I remember we've discussed this years and years ago. We attempted to solve this with PubSub out of the gates. Unfortunately, that didn't work out all that well. PubSub is going the way of the dodo. But the issue here is that we're using Kafka a lot in Folio, but it's not really formalized in that the message payloads or event payloads, however you want to refer to them, they're not, there's no strict schema around them. That's not versioned. And so as we move towards application-specific or independent application release cycles, I think that increases the likelihood that there's going to be an application that's publishing an event that looks like this, and the consumer down here is expecting something different, and you're going to run into problems. So I think that's a solvable problem. We need to figure out some of the details there. And then the last item in this list is platforms. This is not part of Folio. It's actually external to Folio. It's a system operator's tool. You probably are familiar with Platform Complete, the repository in GitHub. Basically, it has several files, including one that's just a flat JSON list of modules and their versions. And that's what's used to build the Flower release, right? The platform descriptor is sort of a formalization of that in that it's a version descriptor as opposed to just relying on GitHub branching strategies. And it includes everything that you need to run Folio. So versions of the infrastructure, versions of the applications, versions of the core components from Eureka and so forth. So that's work in progress by Kitfox. There's actually a sort of preliminary version of a schema for the platform descriptor. And we can get into the details of that if you guys are interested. So again, I'll pause here and let you guys direct the conversation. What part of this would you like to drill into?
One-on-one.
Sure. What do you got?
Okay, so we have a question from Ingolf who asks, will the refactoring / decoupling of module boundaries lead to an even greater number of modules?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. It could very well mean that. It could just mean moving functionality from one module to another, or pulling a little bit of functionality from two different modules into another place. But yeah, it will probably lead to a few more modules. But now that we're working with applications, I think we're still going to have fewer applications than we originally had modules, right? So depending on how you look at it, yes, it might introduce additional modules, but I don't think it changes things all that much.
Yeah, regarding this topic, I can add more details, and let's start from example. The good one is an application bulk edit and application data export. So it was tight coupled with inventory, orders, circulation, other stuff, but Sandra's team did a really great job, and by using and utilizing optional dependency, they leveraged this problem at all. So it means that inventory, like mod inventory, shouldn't know anything about or be like required that mod data export is required for mod inventory, yeah. But for data export, it also inventory is not required because it can export not only inventory records but other records as well. So by resolving these dependencies, it not always producing or creating new modules, but usually it's about decoupling the functionality that this module can use some part of functionality from another module, but it's not a required part, yeah? So something like it.
Yeah, before we move on, it's worth noting that plugging another session later on today, this is the Folio Technical Challenges session where we'll also touch on this topic as well. So if you're interested in this and have ideas and like to discuss it further, please attend that session as well.
For the benefit of the room, there's some further conversation in the chat. Jason had commented that he hoped that this would actually provide the consolidation of domains and modules. Followed a question by Chris Ann asking, will the app/modules be able to talk to each other better under this framework? So, I mean, I can maybe answer that to say that it's not so much about the apps and modules talking to each other better in the sense that the app boundary is still the app boundary. So the communication between apps would be basically what we have between modules now, but modules would be better able to share data and functionality, be more efficient. So rather than having a very closely related module having to go through APIs to access data through the storage module in the application, there should be read-only access to the data so that selective data could be retrieved by that very close module without having to go through the storage modules. You know, obviously we have to have rules in place and make it a read-only access and so forth, but it's a benefit for streamlining the efficiency of the modules primarily. And I think that's it for the questions.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I mean, I think this also helps make the system more composable itself, in that if you don't want inventory, if your library is not using inventory, if we break apart some of these tight couplings, maybe you can have Folio without inventory. Today, I don't think that's the case. So it's because inventory has so many other responsibilities, like the location stuff is in there. Locations aren't necessarily specific to inventory. So, you know, maybe pulling that out into something else makes a little bit more sense, and be able to have a little bit more freedom to entitle just the things that you're planning on using. In the back, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, great presentation so far. Thanks, guys. I'm wondering if you could describe a little bit the process by which the movement to applications, when will that take place? How will it take place? What will we know by this time next year at the next WOLFcon, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. So we've moved to applications. Eureka only works with applications. And as I mentioned in the earlier slide, let's see if I can find it real quickly here. We already have, you know, in the master branch of our repos, we're up to 29, I think it might even be 30 applications. And so this is a reality where we have applications. It's about sort of refining those applications to make more sense. The goal that we have is to remove one of the mega applications entirely by the time Trillium goes GA, and that's the app platform complete, which was sort of a catch-all. Everything else that isn't minimal, that isn't in its own application, just got stuffed in there. And so it's sort of just a bag of modules. And so if we're able to achieve that by the Trillium, I think that'd be a good milestone. Whoever's first. We have one here and then Mark. Yeah.
And I hope my understanding of this isn't out of date, but my only real hang up with applications at this point is that an application descriptor references modules and not interfaces. And so I guess my question is that still the case? And follow-up question, is that always going to be the case? And third follow-up question, if it's, you know, if we're just not going to reference interfaces anymore, do they just become vestigial? I mean, is there any point to having interfaces if we're not going to do that? And also, I would like to reference interfaces.
Sure. Okay. So the question's all about interfaces. So yeah, while application descriptors don't explicitly reference interfaces, like you said, they reference modules, they are taken into consideration when we're doing the validation, the dependency checks, right? So they're still used. It's not just it's not the appendix where you can just remove it later on. It's still used. It's just sort of hidden. It's a layer below. If you remember from like the earlier presentations about Eureka, we have this sort of hierarchy of platforms are comprised of applications, applications are comprised of modules, and if you want to take that further, modules are comprised of interfaces. So there's sort of a hierarchy here, and between applications and interfaces, there's modules. And so they're still used, just not directly. Okay.
Do I have time?
Yes, we have time. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, first of all, I wanted to echo Tom's comments. Great presentation, but I disagree, not just so far, but it will be great until the end too.
Thanks, Mark.
My question is about applications. If you could talk about what goes into creating an application and whether an institution can create their own applications that are different from what's available in public repos.
Sure. So we have basically when you're creating an application, it may sound scary, but it's not all that complicated. What we've settled on is each application will have its own repository. And in that repository, there are a couple things. There's a POM file and a sort of an application descriptor template. And probably a README and a couple other boilerplate things as well. But the important part is it works very similar to how we manage module descriptors, where you have a template and then your POM file, when you build the module, it sort of specializes, it does some substitution in that template, and out comes a concrete module descriptor. Similar situation here where you have a template for your application descriptor, there are maybe some placeholders in there, and then when you run the build of the application, nothing's actually getting compiled, but it's really just specializing that template and spitting out a concrete application descriptor that's usable. So to facilitate that, we have a Maven plugin. It's like the Folio application generator. It's here. It's on the screen. Okay, yeah, Folio application generator plugin. And there have been some improvements recently about this, where now you can create snapshot application descriptors. So if you have like the latest placeholder in your application descriptor template and you run the build, it will retrieve the latest version of that module. As well as originally there was pulling in the full module descriptors, which was very verbose. These application descriptors, especially for like the mega applications, were just enormous. So now we're able to make that much more concise by instead just providing, including a reference to the module descriptor, a URL. And so the application descriptors often fit on one screen, right? It's much smaller. We're talking about tens of kilobytes, I think.
We're on this.
Okay.
A question from Shelley, but I'll put it in.
Sure. Yeah. So at the end, if we have time, we'll circle back to the parking lot, but let's keep going here. So the third theme is innovation. And Vince, did you want to speak to this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Vince Burrow, in case you don't know me, architect with EBSCO and Folio. So the innovation is sort of things that we would like to do in the future. They're not necessarily active right now, but these are directions which would be very interesting and exciting to go in for the platform. And so I've got 3 of them listed here. Some of them are actually not entirely Eureka related, but are beneficial for the platform as well. So the first one that is coming to a head right now is interfolio networking, which, as you know, we've introduced ECS previously, so that ECS allows us to interact between tenants that are in the same deployment of Folio, the same installation. And this allows us, to meet the needs of consortia and even to have, outside of a consortia, a collaborative relationship between libraries, which might be in different tenants, but hosted in the same environment. So we want to go a little further and say, well, now, what about if you are not in the same environment, if you don't have the same deployment, you're not sharing the same database? Well, that's what interfolio networking would be, basically allowing the same sort of functionality that we have with ECS to allow you to share resources and data, even circulation functionality with other Folio deployments. And of course, this is going to be, a little bit challenging because we have to consider the complications at that level, which are higher, because now what happens if you have different versions of Folio that need to talk to each other, and they have different versions of applications that need to share data. So we'll have to take these into consideration, but it is actually something that's missing in Folio that we would love to have. And you could leverage this to create, sort of a network of resources that can be shared as a community and be placed in maybe a common place for everybody to access and make use of for cataloging or other purposes. Also, innovation, FQM, we really didn't have a dedicated session to FQM in this WOLFcon, but there's been a lot of progress in FQM, and it's going along just fine. And in particular, there's a few features that are coming up. Most of them will be available in Trillium. Some are available now to allow us to support arrays. So FQM will support the identification of arrays that are contained within the JSON structure, and you can basically use them as query filters. You can query against them directly. We're extending the range of entities that are covered. In particular, we're going to go and provide SRS support, so we have access to the MARC records from FQM as well. I think I was in an earlier session, the question was raised about custom fields. Yeah, custom fields are supported now in FQM, and we'll have some of them, but we'll have the complete range of custom fields available, all the different kinds. And finally, this is really cool. With Trillium, we'll have the ability to do user-defined custom entities. So right now, entities are created by the system. You know, you have simple entities and then composite entities off of those. Users can then will be able to create custom entities, essentially allow them to make joins within FQM that they create themselves. So that's going to be very interesting. And not listed here, but FQM is not just about, you know, doing very low level data things, but it's being adopted by elements of Folio. And in particular, we have bulk edit functionality leverages FQM internally to do the first phase of bulk edit, which is selecting the records you want to edit. So FQM plays a key role there. We have Keycloak advanced features. So this, as you know, with Eureka, we introduced Keycloak, and Keycloak comes with a lot of things that we could not do otherwise. And we'd like to leverage those and make use of them and expand the range of what we can do for authentication authorization. For example, we can, you know, use the ability to do multi-factor authentication, which Folio doesn't do now. We want to have the logic that is embedded currently in custom code in our login functionality. In other words, the rules and the validation of passwords that can be moved to Keycloak, and then we can make use of a more robust and flexible, powerful system. And we could also use Keycloak's ability to integrate to a whole range of different IDPs using different protocols, you know, OpenID Connect or user federation is something we've long wanted in Folio. We could implement that using some of the Keycloak features that come with Eureka. So that said,
There is a question online.
okay, already.
Yeah, Larry wants to know what happens to patrons when migrating to Keycloak. My understanding is that only staff will be migrated to Keycloak as patrons don't have permissions. Will SIP2 still verify patrons' passwords from mod users instead of from Keycloak?
Do you want to take that one, Alexei, or Frank? I'm not sure that came through because the mic is right here. Right?
Yeah, so to summarize the question, it was from Larry. It was basically about what happens to patrons when you migrate to Eureka, because when you migrate from Okapi to Eureka, we basically look at all of the users, and anyone that has at least one permission assigned to them gets migrated into Keycloak. They have a user record in Keycloak. Keycloak is only needs to know about those users that actually authenticate, log in, and use Folio. There's no need for Keycloak to know about patrons, and so they're just essentially data in the system. They're still users and mod users. That doesn't change. Whether you have permissions assigned to you or not, you still have a user record in mod users. So as far as the SIP2 question goes, I'm not super familiar with how that works. So patrons have passwords, but they don't have any. Yeah, go ahead, Wayne. Maybe you can clarify.
So it's kind of. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of an edge case in EdgeSIP2. EdgeSIP2 provides patron PIN support.
Pins, okay.
Originally it provided it via the password that's stored in mod login.
Mm-hmm.
And there has since been a feature added to actually have a patron PIN that's stored, I think, in mod users, yep, which is probably where it belongs. But I don't know what the migration path for users is who have previously been using the password authentication.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think The patron pin stuff will just remain the same. We didn't move any of that into Keycloak. So yeah, I believe that things would just continue operating the way that they were before. I am unaware of any plans to move those pins into Keycloak either. Any other questions online?
There was a brief question from Shelley. It says, I can use this.
Okay.
So, yeah, Shelley's asking, we already get MFA from our external IDP. Can we turn off MFA in Keycloak once implemented? Yes, of course. You know, this will be an optional facility in Keycloak. You don't have to use it. Oh, Jeremy in the back. Yeah, next time sit up.
Throw it.
So I think it's not listed here, but I think a really cool innovation that you guys mentioned is the idea of module federation. I mean, that's a super neat idea. But I'm wondering if this enables something like heterogeneous hosting sources for modules. So if that's something that has been talked about at all, because it seems like if you're able to sideload a UI module at runtime, and we already know that you can register modules that are hosted in different environments on the back end, that it could open up a business model for like maybe a module developer to just host a model, host an application that they just provide that one application. I guess my question is, am I correctly understanding that that would at least technically be possible, whether or not that's a good business idea or not?
Yeah. So business aside, I think that would be technically possible. It's always been the case in the back end that you can host your backend modules wherever, and you just specify where to find it in the discovery information. Copy in the older system with Eureka that's in the application manager. On the front end, previously everything actually currently everything is bundled up into one giant UI bundle and stuck up on some CDN or wherever, right? And so there wasn't an opportunity to farm it out or distribute it like you're describing. But with this model of module federation, I believe that would be possible because you're specifying, just like in the back end, where to find this bundle, right? So the app foo bundle is over here, the app bar bundle is over there. In most cases, they'll be in the same location, right? But technically, it should be possible, I think.
Right, but you also mentioned maybe not a good business decision, and I think there's security considerations with that because it's a vector to allow injection of bad code into your experience. So when we get there, I think we'll need to have some sort of validation and qualification of anything that gets added in this way as well. Minutes left.
Yep. So if there aren't any other questions, we're pretty much at time. So I'll pull up the additional info slide. Find it. Here we go. So yeah, once we upload the slides to the Schedule, you can check these things out. Roles management with Eureka, that's a link to the session later on this week. There are also links to previous sessions we've had at other WOLFcons, to the Eureka platform overview, to the developer guide I mentioned earlier, as well as a bunch of other stuff. So plenty of resources out there. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Vince, myself, Alexi, whoever on Slack, and feel free to ask. All right. So any last minute questions here before we wrap up? Go ahead, Mark.
Not a question, but a plug for the work that the teams have done, and in particular, adding an AI agent to one of the Slack channels. Do you want to talk a little more about it?
Sure. Yeah, KitFox and EPAM have been a really big help for the early adopters and the Eureka support. There are two different Slack channels. One is dedicated for the early adopters to sort of collaborate with one another. And then there's a more general Eureka support channel. I don't have the actual names of these channels, but I think it's just Folio-Eureka support and Folio-Eureka early adopters or something. And I believe in both of those channels, an AI-backed bot has been used there so that you can mention the bot and ask your question. It'll go through its corpus that was derived from the wiki and try to answer your question as best as it can, providing, citing various sources and pages and so forth. So I think, I mean, I go in there every day. I see people asking it questions and seemingly finding the answers that they want. So from my perspective, it looks like it's working really well. Yeah, so kudos to them. I think that's a really good application of AI. Yeah. All right, well, thank you.